1. Once a year or so, I go through my password manager to see if I have any registered accounts online that I'm no longer using. If I find any, I go to the site and delete them. Usually it's either a simple matter of logging in, going to account settings or equivalent, and clicking the delete account link, or sending an email from the registered email to the site support email address. That being said, yesterday I encountered a rather difficult one. I won't name and shame, that's not the point of this post. Anyway, I logged into one of the accounts I wanted deleted to search for an automated way of deleting it. I couldn't find any, so I went and searched through their FAQ. There was just one sentence telling users to contact their support via email. Fair enough. So I sent an email from my registered email address stating that I'd like my account deleted. I was expecting the usual, "We're sorry to see you go. Can you tell us why you're leaving before you go?" But instead they required some additional verification, also not unreasonable, mostly since the site has something to do with finances. The email exchange goes down like this, a direct copy-paste of the relevant bits, anonymized. "Thank you for reaching out. We're sorry to see you go. Can you please tell us the reason for closing your account and if we could do anything to change this?" "Hi, I no longer require the services provided by the company. Thank you." "In order to authenticate you, we would need you to provide us with the following information. 1. Last 4 digits of the phone number currently linked. 2. Last 4 characters of the ID document used upon registration." Potential problem. When registering to sites working with finances, one usually has to provide some form of state-issued ID upon registration. Problem is, I registered onto that site a while ago, and the ID card I used has expired some months ago. In my country, when your ID card is up for renewal, you get a new one, while giving the expired one back and it gets destroyed. So there was no way for me to know the numbers from it. I tried explaining that and provided some additional verification information. Only the account holder would know, but procedure is procedure, I guess. Phone number's last digits are ABCD. My state-issued ID card has expired since registration and was renewed, which means I no longer have the old card, and I'm unable to see the numbers on it. I can provide the account identifier for my profile page, CODE. Note, this is not visible in the URL or anywhere publicly. "We are unable to proceed without the full verification, so we will need the last 4 digits of the registered document number as well." The state-issued ID has been securely destroyed when the new one was issued, on renewal. It does not exist anymore, therefore I am unable to read you the numbers from it. Since you have a photo of it, you can check the expiry date on it yourself. "We do not have a copy of the document photo you sent us, and the verification process requires that you give us the last 4 digits of this document's number so that we can authenticate you." At this point, I was beginning to get a bit frustrated, but stayed polite. It's not the support person's fault, their company policies are what they are. I understand the need for verification, but it's kinda unreasonable to base it on something that the user probably won't have in the future. Anyway, a few more emails back and forth, I propose the following. Since all the other data and more is correct, note I am referencing to the account identifier and some other personal information I've given in the past couple of emails. If you prefer, I can send 1,000 unique emails with different state ID numbers. One of them will be correct and include all requested information. It's fairly easy for me to do this automatically. "Thank you for the reply. We will be expecting your verification." Okay, game on. I understood that message as, "Oh please, go ahead, we'd love to see you try." So I opened my favorite IDE and wrote a little program which sends emails using the same text, but counting from *000 to *999 for the state's ID number. The complete script is available if anybody's interested, just click through to the original post in the link in the description. The whole code took approximately 20 minutes to write and was incredibly satisfying to do so. "Hi, I would like my account deleted as I no longer require services offered. Registered email, which I supplied, account identifier, which I supplied, last 4 digits of linked phone, ABCD, last 4 digits of my now expired state-issued ID probably were, then the counter going from *000 to *999. Thank you, and I sign off with my name. I copied the script over to my Raspberry Pi, a small computer, which is online 24/7, and set the script to send an email every 10 minutes. I realized it would take a long time for all the emails to go through, but I was being careful not to get banned from sending emails, nor did I want to outright spam the company. So, email with ID *000 goes out, nothing. ID 0001 goes out, nothing. But after email with ID 0002, the third email sent, I got a reply. It's a new support person. Hello, we've put up your account for closure. It will be closed in the following 30 days and you will be notified once the process is completed. And they included a reference ID. I thanked the person processing my request and stopped the script from sending any further emails. Somewhere inside me, I was a bit sad that this show ended so soon. I was hoping just a bit that it would go on for some time. Also, I'm 100% certain that 0002 was not the correct number. If it were something that simple, I'd remember it. Best I can recall, it was somewhere in the 6,000 to 6,999 range. But I might be way off. 2. Greetings. Before I continue any further, I should give my deepest apologies for any writing mistakes you may find, as English is not my main language, and most importantly, I suffer from dysgraphia. Funnily enough, the latter plays a vital role in this story, as you'll get to see later. I work for one of the most boring museums within the most touristically overrated piece of Spanish land. My job is Security and Service Assistant, which is the fancy resume hype fodder way to say I am one of the people that intermittently stands still in a corner and wanders around to make sure no one touches anything and to sporadically answer where's the bathroom, among other minutiae. Such minutiae includes writing down in file by hand any incidences of any kind and the time they took place, like when we started or ended our shift. 1451, we called out a visitor because they touched X. Anything you can imagine. We work in a team of many similar assistants and a coordinator, which, strictly speaking, is the very same but works more hours and has a few extra duties. Which, as per policy and our actual boss's word, she is not our boss. Only does the same as us, plus gives aid and coordination-reliant stuff, such as managing schedules to avoid incompatibilities. However, she and her husband, who happened to be 2 steps below the CEO of this security company, like to act and believe otherwise, granting her the antagonism of this story. Despite her gender, I'll refer to her as Bob, as her head carries the exact same hairstyle of Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons, down to the color, even if less vibrant. I've been working here months before Bob, and when she started, already hated my guts, and behaved like she knew how to do the job better than me despite the time difference and many negligences from her side, and a job so easy and simple that for one to frick up you pretty much have to do it on purpose. This resulted in tons of childish beef and harassment from her side. That is ongoing still to this day, years later. Down to having committed stuff that should have gotten her fired. Yet our higher-ups, for some mysterious reason, happened to be much more tolerant towards her antics than any other negligences. Such got even worse when Bob learned that I am a man who loves male genitals, and more so, the most beautiful non-binary person who has ever graced this earth. Not a coincidence that Bob confirmed it herself. She felt the need to remark that I made God angry right before berating me, as she hypocritically sinned about not loving thy neighbor. During these years, she kept looking for ways to undermine my morale, and any atom of error from my side to get me fired. Turns out I'm so good at my job she had to try lying once. Incidents not worth narrating for the purposes of this post. The museum considers me vital, as I'm the only one that knows English to a conversational level within the assistants, and she's not my true boss anyways. Bob can't fire me herself. She kept micromanaging, disrespecting, and committing other annoyances and negligences here and there as the years passed, sometimes bordering blatantly illegal. During this last month and a half, my hand has been more faulty than usual, and I accidentally provoked scribbles within our file, crossing out words I wrote wrong, like misspelling we called out or whatever. All of us got to do that because our file has some sort of cool paper below each regular paper that copies what had been written on top. Security companies use these to avoid any mischievous shenanigans, and consistently the usage of Tipp-Ex, like white tape, is forbidden, as would make the copy confusing. Bob took notice of this and proceeded to insult me and my doctor prescription tier penmanship, calling me useless, saying I was doing it on purpose, and that one should be a professional and keep these things as clean as possible, even though both my chronic tremors in my hand and my dysgraphia worsened by the former plus stress. That is simply not possible for me. So she ripped out the file, started a new one, as she copied what the previous one had written by herself, threw the other one into the garbage, and later asked the rest of the team to put their signatures in again. Only thing each person has to do individually, no matter what, for obvious reasons. Because Blazinter writes like a fucking toddler. The team didn't react too well, but closer to an alright then, as they were very well aware of my infamous calligraphy. The same happened more than a handful of times during this period, which prompted me to suggest that I could simply write what's strictly obligatory from my side, signature and name, and tell her to write for me any incident I would have originally written myself. Bob didn't react with excessive serenity, and apparently that summoned her imaginary cartoon light bulb on top of her super hairy head, as she phoned our actual boss to talk about this ongoing matter. Instead of just giving a simple response, she'd come by to judge better. Our boss likes to come by herself, on whatever as much time as possible, as this leaves less incidences in written, giving her more leeway for manipulation. Bob isn't the only unfavorable person within the company. Finally, True Boss comes after finding room in her not really tight schedule, and we both describe her the situation at hand, and are even able to show some examples, without bothering to think much. Made my day with her words. I agree with you, Bob, but also with Blazinter. We should keep these as clean as possible, but he's unfortunately clinically unable to reliably keep it that way. As coordinator of this team, you and only you should be trusted for this. And so our new way to do the manual paperwork was put in place. I would have to get the walkie-talkie, and Bob, whenever you would be able to, please write down 11:10 visitor accidentally stained the floor. Thanks. Bob, I am taking my rest. Remember to note it and its duration down. Thank you. She attempted to ask other co-workers to write their stuff, but they rightfully complained, quoting the words for our actual boss. You and only you should be trusted for this. And even attempted to apologize and say my writing wasn't that bad, but our boss also agreed on it being bad and provoking unwanted messes, so... It isn't much, but for once during this most half a decade working here, finally I, or better said, her sole self, was the one that managed to put a minor yet constant annoyance to her job, instead of the opposite. Not much of any sort of big-scale fallout like most stories, aside from her hating me gradually more. But she was already doing that by herself anyway, so I just relished the victory finally and nicely. I guess I should include that she requested a medical file to prove and verify that I suffer from dysgraphia, and wasn't faking this to annoy her. Shouldn't suppose much of a problem, but hey, free pay day to go to the doctor. Now, some might be wondering, can Bob really ask for medical files of mine? No, but she can ask and suggest the pertinent higher-up ask for that. And I'd only send it to HR. 3. Here is a story from a while ago with malicious compliance on the part of my manager. It was just after 2000, and I was working in IT. There had been a busy year leading up to the millennium. Now everyone was looking to get back to normal. The company had other plans for us and decided to make a third of the IT staff redundant. In my team of 12, this meant 4 of us. This wasn't really a problem, as even though I had just moved into IT a few years earlier, the job market was booming and getting a new job would be easy. This HR move was a bit of a surprise as we were very busy. Lots of the routine projects had been put on hold, so lots of catching up. But whatever, they knew best. Redundancy with this company offered a month's salary per year of service, way over legal minimum. They were offering me a year's salary, tax-free mostly, to find a better paying job elsewhere. An offer that would be hard to say no to, but unfortunately, they were not going to ask. The way redundancy works for this company in the UK is that all the occupants of the role are ranked by very carefully selected criteria, and the lowest ranked are goners. The way the criteria are selected are to make them very subjective and capable of withstanding any legal challenge that might lead to an industrial tribunal. If there was one thing the HR hated above all, it was legal hassles. Criteria would be things like expected to be able to contribute well in other divisions of the company, and other such evidence-free bollocks. Why this weird approach from HR? It isn't as daft as it may appear. When trying to reduce headcount, the options in the UK are natural wastage, offering early retirement, offering voluntary redundancy, or having compulsory redundancies. In a team role in IT at this time, what tends to happen is that nobody is old enough to retire, and offering early retirement was actually expensive as it was on a generous company policy. Offering voluntary redundancy means the deadwood stays. Forcing a selection process stops the good people leaving, no redundancy money, and allows getting rid of the poorer performers. Or at least that was the plan. Anyway, my manager had been told he was being made redundant, which was a bit of a tactical error. He wasn't really adhering to the company line as strictly as he might have been had the circumstances been different. He gathered us together and asked who wanted to go. 4 of us, me included, volunteered. So all was good, and everyone in the team was happy. My manager, maliciously complying with the ranking exercise, duly ranked us by the contrived criteria, but interpreted to our ends, and not the company's. These rankings were passed to HR, processes were run, runes scried, oracles consulted, and ultimately decisions made. Lo and behold, the Gang of 4 came bottom of the pack. Because of the extremely subjective nature of the criteria, nobody could prove the rankings were wrong. My manager then let the team know who was staying and who was going, as was right and proper, and we each got "bye-bye, loser" or "you're still on board" letters from HR. That wasn't the end of it, though. HR somehow twigged that they were stitched up by my manager. Comparing the people leaving with the people with the highest annual appraisal scores was an exact fit. HR went into recovery mode and tried briefly to revoke the redundancies. This would have been totally legal, except for one thing. It had been announced that we were the bottom of the selection criteria. Continued employment would have been unthinkable, as we were declared least competent to do the job. And they still wanted rid of 1/3. If they had insisted, this would have been potentially constructive dismissal, either for the Gang of 4, in a weird backwards way. This is when the employer makes life untenable for the employee, such as saying you are rubbish at your job and they want rid of you. Or if another 4 were selected, then obviously the process was flawed, and they claim unfair dismissal, company not complying with own processes. Considering the entire rigmarole, particularly the selection criteria ruse, was designed to avoid legal hassles, they were painted into a corner and had to let the 4 of us go. So thanks, Dave, for playing the system so well to get the outcome the employees and not HR wanted. Epilogue. It was, as expected, easier to get a new job in those halcyon days. I had decided to take 3 months off, but a really attractive role came up. I started 5 weeks later, and have been there ever since. Epilogue 2. Eventually, talking to my friends who stayed, this round of redundancies was, as I sort of suspected, the precursor to eventual outsourcing. This was very much in vogue back then. About 2 to 3 years later, the overly slimmed-down organization was transferred, called TUPE in the UK, Transfer of Undertaking Protection of Employment, to an outsourcer, A bullet dodged there. Tubing means you can transfer on your current pay and conditions, and will rot with that salary, etc., until it's worse than your new employer's standard terms and conditions. No pay rises, bonuses, increased holiday entitlement, nothing. This obviously also ends in another the Deadwood Stays situation, as anyone who can get another job will as soon as the market moves past them. 4. A bit of context to understand the story. I work at a big box retail store. Over the past few months, they've decided to weigh a more heavy emphasis on store safety. Where to find safety tips, how to do things safely, and how to file safety reports. There's 2 people on the security and safety team. It was around the last month that they really started cracking down on making sure that everyone in the entire store knew how to file a safety report. And the safety guy would spend a decent amount of time going around the store and quizzing people on how to file them and also other safety-related things. And as a side note, that will become important later, I am pretty good friends with him. Once I was taught how to do it, my non-malicious compliance began. Normally, working in retail, you do your job perfectly and there's no real need to file any sort of safety report because nothing bad happens. But with my special case, I like to put it as, most others can do their jobs perfectly and be safe, but as the cart attendant, I can do my job perfectly and still get run over by a truck. Anyone who has worked in retail can confirm just how stupid customers can be at times. Now, when you put them behind the wheel of a multi-ton vehicle, things can get very dangerous very quickly if you don't keep your guard up. And so the safety reports begin to pile in from me. Typically, it was about 2 per week. Most of the reports came from having to make a turn or cross through an intersection in the parking lot. I would be stopped waiting for a safe opportunity to continue. A vehicle would come to a stop. I would begin to continue moving carts, and then the car would suddenly start moving and narrowly avoid hitting me and or my row of carts. And so I would just file these nearly missed accidents. I never really thought much of it. That is until we had a safety huddle for the entire store. That is when the leader had announced their quota for safety reports for the whole store was 1 or 2 a week. For me, it hit that in the past 2 weeks from the safety reports that only I had made, not accounting for the other employees who were also filing. I was effectively giving the store's quota that it needed. I just thought it was funny, and later on that day told the safety guy about it. In our conversation, he told me that I was actually filing so many safety reports that the head of the store actually got mad at him because I was filing so many of them. As he put it, "They told me to teach you guys how to file safety reports, and here you are filing legitimate safety reports. Don't know why they're mad." As we later put it, management doesn't quite recognize how dangerous it is to be in a parking lot. By this time, I had turned in my 2 weeks' notice for separate reasons, but he gave me a new drive. Just the knowledge that I was effectively taking blows at upper management just by doing exactly what they wanted me to do was enough to switch from normal compliance to malicious compliance. Because the parking lot is practically my domain, nearly missed accidents are abound for me. In the time since then, I still made about 3 or 4 safety filings. Today was my 3rd to last day that I'm scheduled to work at the store. Typical idiot drivers were abound, and I wind up making a safety report an hour into my shift. I don't think too much of it, other than the fact that maybe some management is infuriated that I'm doing exactly what I should, again. Later on, I noticed the head of security and safety had left their office and were coming in my general direction. Because I was right next to the registers at the time, I thought that something else was going on. Just gave him a typical greeting, but was surprised when he came towards and stopped. He said to me, "Hey, if you ever have any more safety filings that deal with vehicles, just come to me as a safety guy and report it to us directly." As soon as he left, I felt a sense of victory. My compliance in both malicious and non-malicious forms was too much for management, and they finally buckled under the weight of my safety report filings. I was almost laughing at the thought. I told a few coworkers about it, and all of them agreed with me that it was hilarious. The guy with the most dangerous job got asked to stop making safety reports on the most dangerous aspect of their job because they were filing so many. As I said before, I already have my 2 weeks in, and I only have 2 more working days to go, so I don't really care that this feels unusual and not right. I'm just happy to move on to a new job. And in case anyone is wondering, yes, I did have to go to the head of safety and security during my shift today, because someone almost hit the cart pusher later on in my shift. Later on, I learned that it looked like the reason they didn't want me filing is because I filed 10 reports that had to deal with vehicles in a month. And the most they can do is tell me to slow down and pay attention. 5. Many years ago, I, then 25 female, then 5 female and 3 male, Jane and Max, while he finished a tour in Iraq. Not getting into the circumstances, it's enough to say the kids were in a pretty traumatized state, and it was my job to make them as okay as possible, while all the legal crap involving their mother was making its way through the courts. Their mother was permitted some supervised contact, and she could give them gifts. I should also mention that their mother is a Christian, in name at least. This has a little bearing on the story. I wasn't a parent yet myself, but this was pretty straightforward to me. Make sure they feel loved, give them a sense of security, give them normal routines, etc. All in all, things were okay as they could be, given the circumstances. One of the normal routines I implemented was the reading of bedtime stories after baths and toothbrushing, which had never been a thing in their lives. They absolutely loved it, and I was scrupulously fair about it. One day, Jane's story was read first, and Max's was read second. The next day, Max's story read first, and Jane's was read second, etc. One day, sister-in-law gave the kids little Christian books, which went on their bookshelf with everything else. A week or so later, bedtime rolls around. Max picks whatever book, and Jane picks the Christian book her mother gave her. Now, it should be said that Jane knows I'm agnostic. We've talked about it several times before, when she was trying to convince me to attend some church event or other that Grandma, my mom, took her to at her request. I don't care what other people believe, it's not my business, but I'm not that person, and I will not waver from that stance. Of course, Jane is only 5, so I never crushed her the way I would an adult who tried to convert me. But it's been made very plain over the months, and she chooses this particular book. Jane's got a smirk on her face, proclaiming as loud as a bullhorn that she thinks she's got her auntie trapped now. I will have to read some Christian literature. It's Max's turn to have his book read first today, so we go through it with all the appropriate sound effects and character voices. I'm a very animated narrator. Next is Jane's book, which she hands me with the sweetest smile and a little gotcha glint in her eyes. "You're sure this is a book you want?" I ask. "Oh yes, Auntie." "All right." I opened this little Christian book, smiled sweetly back, and proceeded to read that book in, oh Lord, the most dramatic preacher voice I can summon. "In the name of Jesus, amen." Think Kenneth Copeland, with all the accompanying shoutiness and theatrical pauses. I could barely keep a straight face, and Max didn't even bother trying. He was laughing so hard he almost peed himself. After the heavily dramatized reading, I closed the book and handed it back with a smile. Jane gave me a hug, which I wholeheartedly returned, and said, "I'm sorry, Auntie, I won't ask for you to read Jesus books anymore." Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 142, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd appreciate it if you shared the video around. Whether you enjoyed it or not, if you enjoyed it, great, send it to your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, spread the misery. Okay, let's see. We are on Wednesday? Wednesday, okay. And let's just move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day, because I think the next shout-out is later in the week, possibly. Yeah, I think it is. Okay, so, Hellfreezer's question of the day. Okay, what's something you saw on TV or in the movies, whatever, when you were a kid that you were hoping we would have in the world for real by now? Now, in my case, a lot of the stuff I saw when I was a kid, we actually have. We had communicators, like, the flip phones. I had one of those for a while. We have, like, the pads from Star Trek. We don't have holodecks yet, but we're pretty close with virtual reality. I would love a replicator, but that might be... You know what? Yes, it's a little out there. I would love a replicator. In reality, it's probably going to involve nanotechnology, building things atom by atom really quickly, instead of using matter or energy to matter technology like Star Trek. But that's what I would love to have. Ooh, or maybe the flying cars. Of course, we all want flying cars like they had in Back to the Future. Or Mr. Fusion. That's a good idea. Being able to run an engine from trash. Although we are making some progress with solar technology. I'm very much into renewable energy. Okay, so let me know what your answers are. Doesn't matter how fantastical they might be, in a comment in the description. And have fun with it. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.